Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to what should be a very brief rundown of the teams within SCA for the new DPC Season Number 1. It is, of course, MLPDotA, not with John X5 today, as he's going to be working on a separate video about 4 other teams in Division 1 for SCA, but for now, you have me to talk about the teams that did actually get directly invited to the Division 1 of the SCA DPC. Of course, those 4 teams are going to be Tnc, Fnatic, T1 and Boom Esports, and the reason we've made this video in general is because there has been a lot of roster changes going on overall in the past couple months, so I wanted to have a bit of a discussion, kind of let you catch up if you haven't been watching the SCA region as of late, and try to give you a bit of a rundown as to what's been going on and what teams and players to look out for, and of course their individual playstyles. With that, we'll start off with the team of Tnc Predator. Their stack involves Gabby, Armel, KP, Tims, and Febby. Now, in terms of teams that were directly invited to this SCA DPC, I'd say this is the team that stuck with its players for the longest time. At the very least, you have Gabby, Armel, and KP and Tims that have been together for a very long time, and the one roster swap they did make was removing March from that position 5 role, and instead now they have Febby as the POS 5 and captain of the team. Of course, March, don't worry about him. He has got another opportunity we'll talk about in a minute. But for now, Febby is going to be that official replacement for Tnc. And props to Tnc. Febby does seem to gel extremely well with the team. He brings a very kind of fun, loving environment to the team. I think that does suit Tnc very, very well. And he should be a very strong addition to the side of Tnc Predator. Now with that, we've talked about the roster changes for Tnc, let's talk about their playstyle. They tend to play a little bit more conservatively against the other teams in SCA, where other teams tend to be much more aggressive in the earlier stages of the game. It could be argued that Tnc Predator, they like to take their time a little bit. They wait till around that midway mark of the game, around that 15-minute mark, before they start to get active as a team, moving around as a unit and try to create all kinds of chaos on the map. Again, with the playstyle though, it does kind of vary. You've got Gabby in that position 1 role and Armel in the position 2, but where their playstyle can be changed up quite a bit is Tnc does tend to switch these two up for the POS 1 and 2, and while they won't really change lanes, where Armel will still stay in the mid lane and Gabby will still stay in the safe lane, they do tend to prioritize them differently depending on the draft that does come out. So you're not going to be really surprised if you see a player like Armel taking that position 1 off Gabby's hands for a game where he might bring out the TA, he might bring out the Morphling, he might bring out his Medusa, and plenty of other options that are available, and Gabby is generally happy to kind of play the more space creating sort of hero. As we did see in previous tournaments, he does tend to bring out his Wind Ranger at times, and other heroes like that, where they like to roam around the map with the rest of the team and just create space for the real position 1, which would be Armel in those instances. Apart from that though, Gabby generally speaking will be the solid position 1 that Tnc does rely on, and if they feel like they need to switch things up to maybe trick the team that they're up against, they'll put Armel in that higher priority role for a game or two and just try to confuse the enemy. Apart from that, like I said, they do play a little bit more conservatively, and in the earlier stages of the game, you'll mostly notice Tims and Febby will be the ones to watch, as they will be roaming across the map and trying to win as many lanes as possible. And when I say Tims and Febby, I do mean mostly Tims, as he is in that position 4 role, and he does play a hard roaming style position 4. You won't really see Tim staying in lane too often. He will generally prioritize allowing KP the free lane on his own to garner that solo XP and gold for himself, and overall just create as much chaos as he possibly can on the map. Speaking of KP, however, that's the one player we haven't really talked about. KP does tend to play a bit more of a sacrificial position 3. His priorities seem to be heavily revolving around the fact that he needs to create as much space as possible for Gabby and Armel, and so you won't necessarily see KP at the top of the net worth board, but he does have his spot in the team, and most people will kind of look at the playstyle that KP goes for and perhaps look down upon it, but I personally believe that he is a very, very valuable piece of what makes TNC so powerful in the SEA region. And generally speaking, you do need a player like that that is able to kind of sacrifice his own game to make everyone else's game a little bit better, and KP tends to do that, and sometimes even prioritizes Tim's to get more golden XP than himself, and allow that position 4 pick to turn into more of a core role that Tim's can play very, very effectively, and we see it all the time with TNC. In terms of this team, I would say this is the team to watch out for in Season 1 of the SEA DPC. They definitely are the strongest team going into this Season 1. And if we look at a few previous stats, they came first in the ESL 1 Thailand. Of course, they came first in the early major of 2020, before our pandemic hit, of course. They even came first in BTS Pro Series 4, which is just about a month and a half ago. And at the Summit 13, just before BTS Pro Series 4, they did end up coming second, only to Motivate Trust, who were very, very hot. Though unfortunately that team is no longer really existent, as some players were poached. And well, the team overall just disbanded. Nevertheless, we'll move on to our next team in the direct invites. Of course, we've got Fnatic. Now, this team has had a very, very rocky time coming into this new DPC season. Of course, they did receive the direct invite, and they are going to be a very, very strong team to watch. But it's hard to know what to expect from this team, as their previous performances throughout the latter half of 2020 weren't exactly amazing. The team does revolve around the players Raven, Moon, Masaros, Jabs, and DJ. Of course, most people will be aware of the fact that Fnatic did actually end up kicking Jabs, and I believe it was 23 Savage, and they brought in Raven and AU for a moment in time. However, it seems as though Fnatic did realize that they had made a partial mistake, and they did end up getting rid of AU, bringing back Jabs, and DJ agreed he would play the position 5 role rather than position 4, and he'd allow Jabs to take the role that he prefers. And I believe that is a choice and a decision by Fnatic that will end up paying off in the Season 1 of this DPC. Now, whether they're going to be able to compete with teams like TNC is a different question entirely. I don't want to go as far as saying that. I think their games against TNC will be very, very close. But in terms of coming ahead of TNC, it is very hard to tell. Again, their previous games were quite rocky. Still, in the last BTS Pro Series 4 that we did see at the end of 2020, they did end up coming 4th, which overall isn't too bad considering that was with their new roster, and that is that same roster that will be going into 2021. So they are a team to watch out for. Their playstyle is quite similar to TNC as well. I would argue that they do kind of play a bit more conservatively, but they are able to switch things up if necessary. You do look to position 4s like Jabs to make space across the map early on, and that is something Jabs does tend to be very good at. In fact, Jabs is a very similar player to Tim's in that position 4 role. They have a very similar kind of hero pool, and they kind of make the same rotations early on in the game, and you won't be surprised either seeing Jabs kind of not necessarily turning into a core, but he has the potential to be a very high value position 4, and in the rare occasion, he will kind of outscale his own position 3. Speaking of position 3 though, we'll talk about the roster changes of Fnatic. Now of course I did mention Raven did replace 23 Savage for that position 1 role, but the other decision they did make on Fnatic's end is they did end up getting Masaros to replace Ice in that position 3 role. Now mind you, Ice wasn't kicked, he did make the decision to leave to go join Evil Geniuses in North America, and with that Fnatic obviously had a pretty difficult decision to make. What position 3 can actually kind of replace a player like Ice and have some high impact in these games that they are going to go through in 2021, and personally I don't think they could have made a better decision than picking up Masaros. He seems to go very well along with Jabs, as they do both come from the same country, which is Thailand. And of course, Masaros was performing extremely well as part of the Motivate Trust stack. that was making waves in the latter half of 2020 in the SEA region, coming first in BTS Pro Series Season 3 as well as the Summit 13. And you've got to realize this is up against teams like Tnc, up against teams like Fnatic, even T1 and Boom Esports. So Masaros definitely a player to look out for. I do like this draft, or rather roster, from Fnatic. I look forward to seeing what they can get done. Again, their playstyle is going to be quite similar to TNC, but you never know. They may have changed things up in this kind of break period between 2020 and 2021, so I'm very curious to see what they can get done. Moving on from them, we do have, of course, T1 with their brand new roster. Now, a lot of people have kind of memed on the fact that T1 is essentially just GeekFam +1, but I would argue that's a very, very strong part of this T1 roster. Of course, that +1 is going to be their new position 1 and a superstar in his own right in the form of Jackie, who was also there along with Masaros in Motivate Trust through those later stages of 2020, and he was arguably known as one of the better position 1s in the region. In fact, most people would argue he was in the top 3 at the time of position 1s, going up against carries like Gabby, up against carries like Raven. He was really putting them in their place, and he was performing extremely well. So T1, they are a roster to look out for. Of course, their playstyle is yet to be determined though. We haven't really gotten to see much of T1's playstyle, though I would argue, if anything, they probably will try to replicate what Motivate Trust was doing, which is essentially running a very, very strong for Protect 1, giving Jackie unlimited space, allowing the other 4 players to just make space for Jackie across the map until Jackie gives the go-ahead that he is ready to go and fight. And that did work out very well for the previous roster that was Motivate Trust. And if T1 can get a bit of a replicate going of that playstyle, I would say they are probably the top competitors up against a team like TNC for Season 1 of this DPC. Now, I can't go as far as saying they're definitely going to come second or top 3 or even first. It's very hard to tell what T1 is going to be able to get done in this new season. But this is the team to really watch out for. If you want a bit of an underdog team that nobody knows what to expect from, T1 is your team. And as well as that, I mean, how can you not love this roster? It's Jackie, and then you've got Carl, Cuckoo, Zephyr, and Whitemon. It's a very kind of loving, fun roster that kind of likes to play tricks on their enemy. Of course, you've got the coach there that is March, coming off the roster of TNC as their position 5. He'll be taking the coaching role for T1, and that does just kind of reiterate the confidence that I personally have for T1 going into Season 1, as I do believe March is a very, very clever kind of captain / coach now, and I look forward to seeing what March can get done with this roster. In terms of previous placements for T1, just before we go on to the last team, they did come 3rd in the BTS Pro Series Season 4, which again was just about a month and a half ago with this same roster. So we know they are kind of sitting around that top 3 spot, but again, I kind of look for them to improve a little bit more and maybe take that 2nd place spot, even perhaps being able to take 1st place off TNC. We'll have to wait and see though, nothing set in stone yet. Of course, the last team is going to be Boom Esports. Now, they had 1 player swapped out in their roster, and apart from that, their roster does remain the same as it was through 2020. So, you've got Drew, who is the new player. You've got Makoto, FBZ, Hyde, and Kezcute. So, in terms of Boom Esports as a team, the one question mark is going to be just around their position 1 now, which is going to be Drew, and how he can gel with the team, and what kind of performance they can put on. Dreamersoul, he was a very, very good position 1, and I think he was very underrated. I'm not sure why Boom Esports let him go. I'm not sure whether that was Dreamersoul's decision, or whether Boom Esports made that decision to kick Drew. Nevertheless, though, we'll see what, or rather kick Dreamersoul, excuse me, but nevertheless, it'll be interesting to see what Drew can do with this Boom Esports side, and whether he can really gel with the team, and put on those performances that we expect from an organization like from Boom Esports. In terms of playstyle, they do tend to mix it up quite a lot, Boom Esports. though I would say they are one of the more aggressive teams in the upper division. MLPDotA in that mid lane is of course extremely aggressive depending on what kind of hero he gets. You definitely don't want to give heroes like the TA away to MLPDotA, as well as the Spirit Brothers, as well as other heroes that maybe can take a bit more farm priority. But overall from MLPDotA, you are expecting a very aggressive position 2 in that mid lane. He'll rotate, he'll make the space, he might carry for the team if he needs to, but he is that kind of... he's kind of like a glass cannon for the team almost. Not necessarily glass, but he's like the weapon of the team. He is a very, very scary player in his own right, and definitely one to look out for. Speaking of players to look out for Boom Esports, you've got to look out for FBZ in that off lane. Boom Esports and all their players have constantly reiterated that FBZ, he is the backbone of the team. He's the guy that if he's playing well and he's having a good performance, the rest of Boom Esports are probably also going to be having a very good performance, but they have also admitted that if FBZ is off or he's not having a good time, generally the team may just fall apart in that particular game or series. So he is the backbone of the team, the spine of the team, and I would say that FBZ and MLPDotA are going to be the 2 players in Boom Esports that you should specifically be looking out for. They have been really rising stars throughout 2020, and I do look really forward to seeing what Boom can do with this roster overall. In fact, before we do go, we'll talk about their most recent performance. They did end up taking a short break after the Summit 13, because DreamSol had left at that time, but at the Summit 13 they did end up getting 3rd place, which is quite respectable. Nothing to scoff at, though I think for Boom, they went a little bit better than that, so we are expecting something really great out of this team, and depending on how well they gel with Drew, this could be the team that takes that 1st or 2nd place spot off TNC. Only time will tell, but it is going to be a very exciting and competitive region for Season 1 of the DPC. With that, that is going to be the rundown. Of course, the other teams that did have to go through qualifiers are going to be in a separate video that will be done by John, which is why he's not here right now. He is working on the 2nd video, and they should be coming out at roughly the same time for your viewing pleasure. Of course, if you did enjoy, consider following or subscribing, whatever platform you're on. Just like, subscribe, follow, whatever else. We will be providing a lot of SEA content for the DPC, even though we're not really part of the official coverage. We just can't let SEA go. We love the region too much, and we want to be a part of it, even if we're not going to be officially a part of it. So do stick around, give us some feedback if you want. I understand this is the first video, so we're not expecting any kind of perfect video to come out, but we do hope to improve over time, and we will be looking to any kind of feedback or criticism you guys have, and trying to improve upon it ASAP. So look out for the future videos. It's been MLPDotA, and it's been a pleasure. We'll see you guys in a future video. See you then.